Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 374 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on how can breathwork help people with PTSD with Tim Thomas. And it is Sunday, 22nd of March 2026 as I record this. And this interview was flat out brilliant. It was amazing because not only is Tim Thomas a former Australian Special Forces veteran, but he also focuses on mental health, veteran recovery, PTSD, and he draws a lot on in today's podcast episode on his own experiences, how he's helped others, and I definitely know that as an aspiring psychologist, this gave me so much to reflect on, because we also talk about like changing up psychological treatment, meeting vulnerable groups where they are, and also adapting psychological treatment to better suit them and their needs, so you can actually boost in engagement. Also, we talk about the power of a breath work, and most importantly for me was when you're in a mental health service and you're supporting someone who's resistant to treatment, how do you break through to them? How do you encourage them that this form of psychological treatment is going to be powerful, insightful, and it's going to change your life for the better? So we cover so much in today's interview. So there will be a timestamp in the video description below if you just want to skip straight forward to the interview. It's brilliant and I really do recommend it. So I know you're going to learn a lot in the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest. And the first one is, could dream manipulation help us solve real-world problems? The organisation of Periodic Table, McCarthy's song Yesterday, and the main scenes in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein reportedly all sprang from insights that arose during a dream. Some studies have also strengthened the idea that spontaneously dreaming of a problem you're facing can lead to creative solutions. However, evidence that deliberately manipulating dreams can foster creative problem solving has been lacking by the authors of a recent paper in the Neuroscience of Consciousness. In their study, researchers at the Northwestern University and their colleagues report findings that suggest that indeed it can. So this is fascinating because I know when I had a PTSD, and this is definitely something that we talk more about in the content part of today's episode, is that one of the things that they suggest when you have nightmares and other PTSD symptoms during psychotherapy is that you do lucid dreaming or that sort of a thing. And this is when you try and manipulate your dreams. So you try and like change the outcome and those sort of things. And you empower yourself in your dreams and you can rewrite the ending. So that can apparently be quite therapeutic. So it is possible with a lot of training and a lot of practice to manipulate your dreams. But how you do this in a psychological study, I think is very difficult because how do you actually test that someone's actually doing it and not just saying that they're doing it, but also coming up with creative solutions. This is something that we really need because sometimes in life you will be stuck with a problem and you're like, right, through the normal ways, I cannot try this. I've already tried A, B, C, and D, and E, and none of them have worked. So I need to try Z, X, and Y. Completely mixed them up, but the joys of dyslexia. I was going to try some other letter combinations, but as I was talking to my mum the other week, if I say a random letter to her, because she's not dyslexic, she can say the letter that comes after this. I can't do that because I can't understand because it all gets jumbled up, to be honest. Especially LM and P, like they get really confused in my mind. Anyway, going back to the article, but I know that you love these little tangents. So going back to the article, I think if we apply this, if we can help a client who are facing difficulties, facing solutions, if we can teach them skills to manipulate their dreams, whether this is their nightmares because of a traumatic experience, a problem in their relationship if we're doing couples therapy, or if we're doing some sort of systemic family based intervention, if we try and get them to come up with a creative solution to solve their communication difficulties or other family based problems, then that could be very powerful and very useful, and it could be further support that the client, from their point of view, they do have the answer, they do have the strength, and they do have the internal resources to deal with these problems in themselves after therapy's over. So that's something to think about. But I would say that the methodology, very interesting. I think we've always got to be rigorous. This will be very, very difficult. But it's really interesting and it does give us some food for thought. So the next one is, what happens in the brain when your mind goes blank? Open quote. Does being awake necessarily mean being conscious of something? Close quote. This is the question posed by researchers at the Sombra University, France, and their colleagues in a recent paper in PNAS. The father of American psychology, William James, certainly believed in a constant stream of consciousness, involving awareness of everything from the outside world to irrelevant thoughts. This view has long been influential. However, based on a comprehensive test of 62 participants, the team's answer to this question is no. It's perfectly possible to be awake, but to have, even only for a moment or two, an empty mind. Using EEG, the team observed an association between mind blanking and a slowing in behavior. The participants' reaction times were longer and they made more mistakes. They also showed distinct changes in brain connectivity and sensory and processing during mental blanks, and even a shift towards sleep like activities in certain parts of the brain. So personally, I flat out love EEG because I did it for my undergraduate dissertation, and it's so much fun because whilst you're doing the nightmare of putting the EEG cap on the participants, doing the gel, making sure there's strong connectivity, parting the hair and everything, you get to talk with the participants, you get to form those working relationships, and it's really interesting. It's really engaging, and oh, I had such brilliant experiences, and it was just so much fun. And it was some of the highlights of my undergrad. So, to be honest, the fact that they got to do EEG research, very jealous, very, very jealous. But, and also testing 62 participants, I know how long that takes. Like, granted though, our study was like a 7 day study, so we had to do EGE at the beginning and end. So from a logistics point of view and the sheer amount of time that it would have taken them to do 62 participants, even if it was just for one session, would be a long time. So well done those researchers. Going back to the actual point of the article about what happens in your brain when your mind goes blank. I definitely know that I can be talking to someone, My mind can go blank if they're talking for a really, really long time and there's something actually interesting that they're saying. Also, I can just be going about my day on autopilot, and then suddenly I realize, oh yes, I've been on autopilot the whole time though. So I think that does sort of classes your mind going blank because you're not paying attention, you're not consciously aware of stuff, and there can be time when someone's shouting at your name. You have no idea that they're trying to talk at you or get your attention. So, in terms of applying this to clinical psychology or even educational psychology, I would just say that, well, this is quite a tough one to apply. I would say that the only educational psychology point of view I can think about is just a bit of empathy and a bit of awareness. Because if you're supporting a child who has and their mind's gone blank and they're not paying attention, well, instead of saying, "Oh, you should always be paying attention," or no, actually, if you're blaming them, because you think, "Oh, you're awake, you're conscious, therefore you're just ignoring me," you obviously know that I'm trying to get your attention and that I'm teaching. I would say, well, no, you shouldn't blame the child for that. Their mind might have honestly just gone blank, and this means that their mind is empty and they're not paying attention, even though they're awake. So instead of blaming them, maybe we actually need to reflect for a moment and see, is there anything I can do towards that specific child, and to be honest, any other child, to try and make my lesson more engaging. For example, I know the multiple theories of intelligence suggest that everyone has a general intelligence, but other people can have more fluid intelligences, which means that they have a like skill spike in different areas, and by teaching and incorporating the multiple theories of intelligence, you can actually adapt your teaching just so it engages different people's fluid intelligence. I probably not explained it as best as I could have, but that's something that you could do. So it's about being reflective and just having an awareness. So the last one is all or nothing thinking is ruining your gym routine. It can be easy to fall into all or nothing thinking when it comes to good habits. Miss a few days at the gym, skip a meditation session, or eat one unhealthy meal, and it feels as though you failed altogether. In a new study, researchers explore all or nothing thinking amongst people who have struggled to stick with exercise, finding that rigid, idealized standards can lead people to abandon workouts entirely when plans are disruptive. For this study, the researchers split 27 participants who have often tried but failed to stick to regular exercise into four focus groups. The team conducted semi flexible, structured discussions to explore what participants thought counted as exercise, what typically derailed their plans, what they went through their minds when they were disrupted, and why they kept starting and stopping. And from here, the team drew out several themes, from fixed ideas about what proper exercise looks like to being baffled by their own lack of an exercise routine. So, in my experience, and this is definitely something I've had to learn as a trauma survivor in terms of through behavioral activation. I've had to rebuild my routines. I've had to rebuild what makes me happy, what is essential, and what is pleasurable in social activities. And it is very easy to think that, oh, if I miss one enjoyable session, then that means that I'm a failure, means that I'm useless, etc. And all of those negative thoughts. But no, all or nothing thinking is never helpful. You do just need to slowly build stuff over time. And if you fail, I say, air quotes, to be honest, then you've already failed to succeed. Because even if you do 1 out of 5 social activities, that's still one more success than you had last week. That's really, really good. And even if the next week you only do 1 out of 5 pleasurable activities, that's still brilliant because you haven't gone backwards, you've not decreased, you've maintained. And after months, if not weeks or years of having bad mental health, that's amazing that you're doing one pleasurable activity a week. That's amazing. And that is progress. So all or nothing thinking is not helpful. So that's how we can actually apply it to a clinical psychology. But also, as an autistic person, I love my routines. I get very annoyed or frustrated when my plans are derailed. This is something that I've had to learn about that it's so okay and that all or nothing thinking isn't helpful to my goals, my mental health, and my well being. So, to be honest, this is just the worst thing ever. And because I'm on a slight educational psychology mindset in this news section, I would say that this is really good to teach kids because if we teach kids that even if you fail to succeed and even if you do a little bit, then that's still really good. It's still progress. Sure, it would be amazing if we could just complete a task at first time. We can do it all. We don't have to pause. We don't get derailed. That would be the ideal world. But things are always going to pop up. Things are always going to challenge us. And whether this is helping out a friend, um, your car breaks down, oh, that's so annoying when that happens. Or my personal one is when your battery dies. That is just so annoying. That's like the worst thing ever because batteries just tend to die at times. Apparently, it's only happened twice in the past 8 years or 6 years. How long have I been driving? I don't know, to be honest. But I know that my battery has just died twice in my two different cars. So, not helpful. So I would just say that if we teach kids of this, if we incorporate this in ourselves, and also we can model this as adults, so we can actually like explain and teach kids our thought processes. So, for example, if you're in a class and you're like, "Oh no," I don't know. Of course, you would do it a lot more engaging than this, or a lot more proper than this. But you would do something along the lines of, "Oh no, I really wanted to get through all of this lesson, but I've still taught you most of it. So even though I feel frustrated or sad that I wasn't able to complete all of it, instead of thinking that I'm a failure for not doing all of it, I'm going to take that as a win because I've still done something." And you can sort of model that behavior for children just so they know that it's okay to be frustrated and to process their emotions. But also, you've got to focus on the positive that you've still done something. So that's something to think about, actually. So I really hope that you enjoy the psychology news section. So let's move on to the personal update. So moving on to the personal update. First of all, I do just want to start this personal update by saying that if you are a student at the University of Kent, then I hope you're okay. I hope you're safe, and I hope that your friends, your family are all okay too. Because for our international audience in the United Kingdom at the University of Kent, which is my old university, they've had a meningitis B outbreak, and quite a few people are sick. 2 people have died, and one of them was a University of Kent student. So please get your preventive antibiotics, please get your vaccine, and please protect yourself. And I know that because me and my mum looked through the paperwork, I'm not vaccinated for meningitis B because it wasn't common in the UK for men B vaccines to be rolled out to children until 2015. So, and I would get it done privately because I'm like, oh, this is a bit dangerous now. But for £200, I cannot afford that. So, just something to think about. But I really hope that all of you are okay, and please just protect yourself, follow the health advice, and just I do not want any of you getting sick, and that includes for anyone all over the world. So, secondly, I want to give a very quick tip about preventing burnout. So, this week I gave myself an incredible amount of stuff to do just because there were some massive projects that I wanted to get started, and a lot of other stuff happened, which sort of derailed me. But then stuff got added to the to-do list and a bunch of other stuff. But some of that was really nice, and ultimately the thing that stopped me from getting burnt out was simply taking a few hours off, not doing anything to the to-do list, just enjoying myself for a few hours, relaxing, and just having dinner with a wonderful family friend because she came over for like 3 hours last night. And when she left, I went upstairs to do stuff, and the to do list was so much less intimidating. I was relaxed, I was socially recharged, so please look after yourself and remember about behavioral activation. You've got to find a balance between doing pleasurable, necessary, and social activities. So it can be really good that you focus so much on essential activities and also pleasurable activities. You've got to have that social contact too. Just something to think about. Also, another really fun project that I started this week, and something that I never thought I would do, is the last week's surprise podcast episode on does psychology have a licensing degree problem in the UK? I've decided to launch that as a small campaign, and I've already written to my member of parliament. I've already written to the health secretary, and I've already started a petition to the UK government to look into working with the licensing authorities, which in the UK is the British Psychological Society and the Health and Social Care Professionals Council, about creating licensing degrees. And the plan is when that petition gets approved in a few weeks, I also want to invite to the BPS, the Health and Social Care Professionals Council, universities, and I also want to invite to the general public to try and make a bigger splash as possible because this is really important. This is a critical issue. And another reason why I'm doing it, and I will probably do a podcast episode on this in the future, is that as a clinical psychologist, you are not just a therapist, you're also a policy writer and an advocate. So through this project, I've had to write policy briefings, letters. I've had to do a bunch of other stuff. I've had to really summarize points, writing for government and government ministers, in addition to heads of universities, also psychology departments, etc., in preparation for when this actually gets approved. So it's something that I'm having to do, and I'm having to really learn about how to do policy writing. How do I advocate for psychology? How do I talk about psychology issues with people who have no interest in psychology, or they have no idea about what psychology actually is? And in a said they're motivated by stuff like creating jobs, economic growth, what helps them look good to voters, etc. It's a fascinating project. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really looking forward to when this petition gets approved, just so I can go full hardcore on this campaign because it is really interesting. I'm learning a lot of their skills, and I've actually got a job in to do with tomorrow, and I'm looking forward because I can actually mention this project to give me experience in policy writing and interacting and writing letters to a wide range of different organizations and external professionals. So, lots happening. It's a lot of fun, and I really am enjoying life at the moment. As always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment out of the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi Whiteley, leave a comment on the Facebook post or LinkedIn post. And as always, I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And if you want to and always feel free to send pictures of where you're listening from, because I always love to see where all of you are from all over the world. And today's episode has been sponsored by Healing as a Survivor, a personal and clinical psychology guide to healing from sexual violence. So this is a brilliant sponsor for today's episode, because this great, really easy to understand book takes you through several reflections of my rape counseling. So this includes how did my own PTSD impact me? How did I heal? How did I do breath work? What other self-soothing techniques did I do to help process out my trauma, relax me, decrease my PTSD symptoms? And this is just such a brilliant addition to today's podcast episode. Because if you want to learn more about PTSD, how to recover from it, and how to work clinically with someone who actually has a PTSD, this is an absolutely brilliant and critical companion guide. So I cannot recommend it enough. So that is Hidden as a Survivor, available for all major ebook retailers. You can order the paperback and hardback version from Amazon, your local bookstore, or local library if you request it. And if you want the audiobook narrated by artificial intelligence, then now you can, at selected audiobook retailers like Spotify, Kobo, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble, and selected library systems like Overdrive and Biblioteca. So, whilst buying books helps to support the creation and the editing of the podcast, my time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. So, as always, a massive thank you to my wonderful patrons. Your support shows that you like the show and you are willing to continue. So, if you wanted to become a patron of the show and get access to over 100 exclusive blog posts, which will be made into podcast episodes for weeks, months, or even years, then please head on over to patreon.com/search the Psychology World podcast. If you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, then now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. So that's enough for the personal update. Let's move on to the content parts of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about how can breathwork help people with post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is a massively brilliant interview between me and Tim Thomas. This was a great conversation. I flat out loved it. And today's podcast episode really did give me so much to reflect on. So before we dive in to the interview, I just want to give you a little bit of a bio about Tim Thomas. So, Tim Thomas is a former Australian Special Forces commando, martial artist, and veteran recovery specialist whose life story is a masterclass in resilience. He was raised in a racially divided South Australian town, and his earliest connection with Aboriginal elders shaped his understanding of courage, community, and a culture. Tim left home at 17 to work on a remote cattle station before later reinventing himself as a full-time martial artist and becoming a recognised figure in Australia's early no-holds bars MMA scene. After the Bali bombings, Tim joined the first direct recruiting special forces in Take. This pushed his mind-body connection to the limit to earn his place amongst Australia's elite commandos. After tours of duty in Afghanistan and East Timor, he faced undiagnosed PTSD and he transformed his own struggles into a mission to help others grow through theirs. Nowadays, through Commando in Your Corner, Tim uses powerful storytelling, humour, and brave inner side to show people that the most powerful force on the planet isn't a weapon, it's a conversation. So this was a brilliant in that through, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you. So let's dive into it. So, hi everyone, and moving on to the content part of today's episode. So, today I'm welcomed by a brilliant guest because we're going to be talking about post traumatic stress disorder, mental health, and trauma. And as you know from my previous podcast episodes, as someone who's experienced like a lot of trauma in their life, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So, hi Tim, welcome to the podcast. Can you please introduce yourself?
Connor, great to be here. So my name's Tim Thomas. I'm a former professional fighter and Australian Special Forces soldier. And these days, I help people do things that most people have forgotten how to do, and that is quality sleep.
Brilliant, thank you. And I definitely know that like quality sleep is a really in like important because I knew that for my mental health, if I didn't get like enough sleep, then it would only make my mental health even worse. So thank you. So can you please tell us more about your journey from professional fighter and special forces into what you do now?
I guess I got to the right path by doing all the wrong things, uh, and not that I'd call what I was doing as wrong, but I was going about it in a way that fatigue and trauma was almost inevitable. Thinking you're bulletproof, thinking you don't have to sleep, thinking that you can cash in your tomorrows to live today, and there'll never come a time where you have to pay it back. So it the origin point where I realized there was something going on was in Afghanistan on deployment, and I was beyond fatigue because they train you for fatigue, but then there's a whole other emotional fatigue because you've lost mates over there, you've seen all sorts of things happening to others, and it was like I only had 2 cents worth of energy left, and I thought, what's the point? There's no point carrying on. I'm going to die in this crap hole. And then a voice came through. I don't know where it came from. It said, if you've only got 2 cents worth of energy, you better invest that wisely. And I didn't know what breathwork was, but for some reason I looked at my left thumb when I was laying down. We never got anything you'd call sleep, but every now and then you could get horizontal in the dirt. And I looked at my left thumb and I pictured like a pinhole in the tip of my thumb. And I just did a big nasal breath through this pinhole at the end of my thumb. And it didn't just relax my thumb. Eventually it turned it into white light in down through my thumb in my mind's eye. And then I did the same thing with my pointer finger. And then I fell asleep and I woke up with 20 cents worth of energy. And I thought, that's interesting. I went to bed with 2 cents, breath work turned it into 20. And again, I didn't know what breath work was, but just I was breathing. And so every time I got horizontal, instead of just crashing into fatigue, I'd invest that 20 cents, get back $2. And eventually it got to a point where I was good inside my own skin. But it's funny how energy works. When I only had 2 cents worth of energy, Connor, all I could think about was me and my world and how it really sucked. But then as my energy rose, I became aware of other people outside of me. And you know what? If they're having a bad day, I'm having a bad day, especially in a war zone. And so I thought, well, I can't just have enough energy for me. I've got to have energy for people around me. Because, even if I don't like them, who do I want around me when good times turn bad? So that idea of helping others, I kind of knew it, but it really got embedded in my DNA in Afghanistan. And again, I didn't know what breath work was, but then it just helped. So getting out of defense, I had undiagnosed PTSD, and I didn't know it. I just knew I wasn't sleeping well and that everything was annoying. And why is everyone sort of doing well in life and getting by, and I'm living this life of quiet desperation? So, after seeking unsuccessful help in the mainstream medical system, I realized uh, that there must be a lot of other people stuck in this situation. So I've got to find a way forward for me because I've got a feeling there's many others in this same situation. Um, and so I started creating these programs that worked on the things that I'd observed were the real problem areas. And these aren't on the spreadsheet. The thing about me though is I'm dyslexic, so I see things in patterns. And I saw that pain, it doesn't matter if it's emotional or physical, it'll eventually turn into loneliness, isolation, and you don't even know it's happening. And that's the real killer. Um, and in that place of loneliness and isolation, if I'm the only one that's got my back, everything's a threat because everything is a threat. I can't drop my guard for a second because that means something bad's going to happen. It's going to be my fault. So fatigue was something that went hand in hand. So all the success metrics of the programs we ran, sleep and the improvement of sleep was the metric we judged whether it was a success or not. So breaking the isolation and getting people out of fatigue was sort of the main things that I discovered and seemed to really, really work in the recovery space.
Well, brilliant, and like, thank you so much for sharing that because I understand that that must have been really difficult. So it's full testament to you, your strength, and also your resilience, so that you were able to, in like your lowest of moments, that you were able, to do that at breath work. You were able to realize that, oh, I need to be okay, and I need to be more proactive just so everyone else around me is okay though, especially in a combat zone. So a massive well done though, because I know that for my personal experience, it takes a lot to overcome that. Especially because as a USA though, the most annoying thing about PTSD when you're seeing everyone around you is living their nice, happy lives, like they're going to places, you're just trapped in your house because because if you go outside, you know you're going to have a PTSD attack. So I totally understand what you. Plus, it's also really impressive that you were able to develop these programs. So how did it start in terms of finding more clients, or how did you actually start recruitment and the sort of a business aspect, if that makes
Sure.
sense?
Yeah, no, no. Well, I worked for a charity that worked for soldiers, and it was no one was attending because the thing about it could be a guy thing too that we tend to think that if we ask for help, that means we're weak, and if we're weak, we'll let the team down. So there's a bit of a thing that we stop ourselves. We're not our best friend in that area. And I noticed people would come into the center, they'd come and they'd go really quickly. So I thought, well, I've got to change the culture here. So I started these men's groups, and I had them at a very specific time of day. So just as the sun was setting, it's light, but there's different spectrums of light. And those spectrums of light create melatonin, time to, sleep and rest. Uh, and I'd have a fire going. And people, as the sun went down, the men would gather around the fire. Again, another safety thing. And then they'd eat, and then we'd all sit in a circle. And I would simply interview guys that are, have moved forward in their journey, and they're willing to share about how it was when they were in that place and how they got through it. And it was such a simple thing, but I understood that if you don't break someone's isolation, then it's most resources are water off a duck's back. So, millions and billions of dollars go into, mental health. But if you're not breaking their isolation and then getting them out of fatigue, it mostly doesn't land. And we had a goal of saving 40 veteran lives from suicide. I would have died happy if I achieved that. That, Connor, that was achieved within 12 months because of those two things: breaking the isolation and getting them out of fatigue. And sleep is a very measurable metric. And how I with lessons learned in that area, I distilled that down into a business, because what I've discovered is that your life is shaped by two moments every day: the 5 minutes before you go to sleep and the 5 minutes after waking. And if you've got PTSD, you're poisoning both. Breath work allows you to reclaim those two moments and find that peace, find that power. So that's how I created the business of understanding those two critical moments in people's lives, and then making a very easy to use online tool for people to just have that there exactly when they need it. It's a tiny investment of time, but it creates a massive shift on how your nervous system operates. And obviously, this isn't just for people with PTSD. I just had to go that deep and get that effed up to find this universal truth, that was just natural and immediate, and it just kept working.
Definitely, and also like thank you for sharing that because it's something that I've been very interested in now for a like longer time. Is that like, well, if we actually talk to people and if we actually taught them the importance of like sleep and the mental health benefits that it has in like schools and stuff, though, but then it would mean that people like you and me who also would go through like a trauma wouldn't have to hit rock bottom before we find this like miracle cure, and to some extent, it really is a miracle cure because once you realize this, your entire life does get so much better.
You're right, Connor, and the data is in. Sleep poor people have a 2 to 300% increase in mental illness. So you could be completely fine, but if you're not sleeping well, you have a 2 to 300% increase in mental illness, or likelihood of mental illness. And to me, I look at that data. Well, then, if we can improve sleep, surely that means you can improve it by 2 to 300%.
Mm.
And in fact, in Afghanistan, we used to use that as a weapon of war. We used to deliberately run these operations that would disrupt the enemy's sleep. We didn't know about the science of sleep. We just knew if we could take it out for 3 nights, it would mess them up better than a bullet.
Oh, wow. Okay, then. So that's really in like impressive though, and it does show that that the science can be used for the more like a darker side though, but it is really clever.
But yeah, just to finish that off though. But I mean, so these days I say
Mm,
if you care about somebody,
mm.
you care about their sleep. And people kind of know that, but I always like to ask the question, with all the people you care about, what have you done? Have you done anything active to make sure they're getting a good night's sleep?
Yeah, because it's so simple, but none of us ever think about it. We always think about the more so-called practical aspects in terms of like comforting them, bringing them dinner, making them tea and stuff. But in reality, sleep is actually so simple that we often overlook it. Yeah, like I thank you like for that. And the second point that I just remembered that was that, well, was that for our like audience though, where like you might be working in a mental health service though, and as Tim did though, like if you find that your in like engagement isn't actually as high as you well, would want, consider changing it though, because like Tim has said though, like the men weren't as in engaged, but because he like restructured it, so he focused like around the for the fire, doing it outside, and also doing it when the melatonin is actually being like increased though. Like it's really in like important that led to an approved inner like engagement because one problem that the West has when it comes to like a mental health is that we always do it indoors during the day, and that just doesn't work for certain people though. So adapting it is really good.
Connor, you said a mouthful there. An underlying principle we found is us humans, we're light receptive beings. We're very receptive to the light that's around us. So natural light, sunrise, sunset, our ancestors for millions of years have been exposed to us, and that ancient DNA is still inside of us. So natural light exposure is so critical. So the first thing when I was in the throes of PTSD, the first thing a good psychologist told me was, Tim, a sunrise is, a natural antidepressant because it, you know, turns off the sleep chemicals, turns on the wake up chemicals. And if you can get naked sunlight through your retina, it hits a part of your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. I hope I said that right. But basically, that's in charge of all your internal clocks, all your circadian rhythms. So when people say to me, give me a good sleeping tip, and I'm like, well, it happens first thing in the morning. If you can get that natural light through your eyeballs, then all your internal clocks are clocking on together. It's because sometimes people at the end of the day, they turn off the light, get in a bed, and there's a part of them still running around the place. All right. And that really impacts on that golden 5 minutes before sleep.
Okay, definitely. Yeah. So yes, and definitely after the a podcast episode, I'm going and have to like go out to slow there, but just so I can like get that. But you were mentioned about
Sorry,
culture.
kind of, but I
Yeah.
will just stop you just for a second because this light, it has to be naked light. You would need to have your glasses off to get that light through your retina, just so you know. Otherwise, any
Okay.
kind of glass, looking through a window or having glasses on will stop the full spectrum getting in. I just wanted to tell you that so you can set yourself up powerfully.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. So, but something else that I found on your website was that as a child, you were connected with the Aboriginal elders of your community. Would you mind telling us more about that and like some of the insights that you learned?
Yeah, sure. So growing up in that space, I grew up in a town that was very racially divided. So if you think of sort of deep South Mississippi type stuff, um, my dad worked in the church for the Aboriginal community, and as a kid, I could see two types of spiritual connection. In the Indigenous space, they were connected to the land, they were connected to each other, and it was in everything they did. In church on Sundays, there was a lot of, white guys saying they believed, but it didn't really show up in anything else they did during the week. So, and I'm not saying it was all peaches and cream either. There was so much violence, especially around alcohol, in that community. I grew up just thinking it was normal. I used to play, thought it was funny, like a cartoon when all this stuff would happen. But, if it happened to a kid these days, there'd be all sorts of outrage but it was just normal back in the 70s, right? It took about 3 years before the local First Nations started trusting Dad. But then once you're in, you're in the community. So I still go back there, to this day, and go hunting and fishing and camping, um, and it's kind of like you are what you're marinating. If you want to get a real, close connection to the land, hang out with people that are, connected to the land. Yeah, most of the traditional foods I still enjoy eating. It reminds me of my childhood. I hope that answers your question, Connor.
Yeah, yeah, definitely though, but because like, I've always found it really interesting though, but like learning about other cultures though, and like, I'm sorry to hear about the like alcohol violence of your childhood town though, but like that must have been really like difficult for like quite a while though. But so like thank you for like sharing it. Do you think that the Aboriginal and their teachings taught you anything about modern mental health or anything that we could apply to today?
Good question. I believe we're as powerful as we are connected. Our peace, our power, our happiness, our love is relative to how connected we feel. All right. And all the illnesses we have, mental, physical, and otherwise, are the blockages that stop that connection. In our natural state, we are divinely connected, I believe. But in my case, PTSD, that was a blockage. Okay. In our modern Western world, that creates a speed of which we do things that um, creates blockages. Modern society stops us, often robs us of quality sleep, and fatigue is a big blockage. So, if I was to say, I'm almost hesitant to say this because most people don't understand. So you might have heard the term grounding. Have you heard
Yeah,
that term where you walk around barefoot grounding? Okay,
yeah,
so we don't
definitely.
just get nutrition from the earth by eating the fruits of it. We get nutrition by putting our bare feet on the ground, and it's hard to explain this. How do you say to a white person that putting your feet in a sacred area feels better than winning lottery?
Yeah, I understand what you mean because, like, it is a really hard aspect to I say that word, but grounding is really in like a point though, because when I was having the worst of my PTSD and my panic attacks, one of the most relaxing things that I find was laying on my back, focusing on the gravity pushing me into the ground, just so I know that I was safe, I was anchored, and I was actually there. That was a really powerful grounding technique but you're right though, it does sound so woo-woo. It sounds crazy and like it's not gonna work, but it really, really does.
Well, some places are more energetic than others as well.
Mm,
And this is where, when you have a connection to a particular area and you can walk around barefoot, there is something that shifts, and it's hard to put into words, but it is like a nervous system shift. It has to be experienced. You can't just talk about it.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, and like I think I vaguely understand what you mean, but you're right though. Like in a yeah, but, like until you actually go somewhere and until you actually like experience this R moment or this spiritual moment, you can't explain it and you can't really truly appreciate what it is. Yeah, so
Mm.
okay, so what is breathwork in a bed? So is that just your company or is that an app? I
Well,
remember
okay,
an
no,
app.
well, I'll see. See, most people try and fix their life while exhausted. Breath work in bed simply helps people recover their energy first. So, do you remember how I spoke about our life is shaped by those two 5-minute moments before sleep and upon waking? Breathwork in bed is a simple tool to help people through those moments with breathwork in that place in your bed where most people often struggle with their thoughts going to sleep and then struggle getting out of bed. This is what the breathwork in bed app does. It just gives you the breath work to turn your bed into a cloud, literally tonight, and then into a trampoline when you need it.
Okay, brilliant. Brilliant though. So, well, like, could you take us through like a step by step, like how the app works? Just so we have like some more practical tips as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, look, people who are exhausted don't want an extra sick things to remember going to sleep. So the genius of the app is you just tell it when you want to sleep, when you want to wake up, and we take care of the rest. Because when I'm tired and I'm going to sleep, I'm like, but there's a notification, tap, tap, and then it'll guide my breath to breathe a certain way to elicit a certain medicinal response. And then in the mornings, you'll see a notification, tap, tap, and then you don't get out of bed yet. You stay in there, breathe a certain way, move your body a certain way, remove some of that stuck energy, and your feet swing over the side in a very different way.
Okay, thank you. Well, yeah, because I know that when I tend to like wake up though, um, if I'm really bad, I go on my phone. I don't know for like a while, which I know you're not meant to do. I know that's a bad, but I'm human. I'm not perfect. Perfect though, but like it's really a good idea though. Whether if we can like just like take a moment, be mindful, do with that breathing exercise. So what sort of like a breathing though, like do you in like encourage us like to do that? We're just
Sure.
so like tonight when we like go to bed, we can sort of like using this for ourselves.
Okay. Well, I'll be happy to show you a little exercise now that'll help,
Please do.
people. So all I'm going to get you to do, Connor, everything is an invitation. Nothing's forced. So I always ask three simple questions before I do any breathwork exercise with anybody. So Connor, do you give permission to your very own breath to make every single cell in your physical body feel really, really good?
I do.
Awesome. That was easy. Second one's just as easy. Connor, do you give permission to your very own breath to fully nourish and make your conscious thinking mind feel really, really good?
I do.
Excellent. Last one. Do you give permission to your own breath to make your unconscious mind feel really, really good?
Yes.
Fantastic. So all we're going to do right now, Connor, is breathe in and then breathe in more, 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 more. Breathe in more, 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 more. Now just hold it and wriggle your shoulders, wriggle your arms, wriggle your spine, wriggle, 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 wriggle. And then when you're ready, let it out with a nice big sigh. Ah,
Yeah, that was fun.
okay. Yeah. Teeth start showing when we start breathing properly.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show you how to boost that, my friend. Okay, because this you've just put your toe in the shallow end of the pool. I'm going to take you down to take it a little bit deeper now. So this time, and this is what I love doing, Connor. We all have these amazing bodies, but we just don't know what they can do. And you probably didn't know this, but in your two fingers and your thumb, you've got a power button. Okay, when you pinch them really hard, you boost your inhale. Okay, so I'm just gonna play with this. So before, when you breathed in and then you breathed in more, 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 you noticed that your top third was kind of filling up.
Yeah.
Okay, all I want you to do with your fingers here is breathe in part way, and then when you want to feel this area, pinch your fingers and breathe in. So just play with that. Go.
Yeah, it really does work
You notice those
actually.
little power buttons? It's funny how it works, right?
Yeah.
So all we're going to do now, I've got my hands up here so you can see it, but keep them down by your sides. Have your power buttons down by your sides. And this time we're going to blow it out. And as we blow it out, we're going to shake it out. We're going to blow out as much as we can. And then we're going to do a rapid inhale through the nose. And halfway through our inhale, we're going to hit our power buttons and look up. And then
Okay.
we're just going to wriggle, 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 and then let out a big sigh. Cool, cool.
Yep, definitely.
I'll be right here with you as we do it. So blow it out, shake it out, blow it out, shake it out, blow it out, shake it out, blow it out, 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 out.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah.
Okay, let's start this again, and we'll do it together.
Okay.
So when we blow it out, try and blow out as much as possible, because this is where energy is, and this is where stuck energy can sit. So when we blow it out, try and blow it all the way out, and then
Okay.
when you breathe in, try and like really rapid, like double the speed of the inhale. So you're sucking that air over your nose.
Mm.
Okay. So behind our nose, we have these sinuses, and breathing through our nose creates a gas called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide improves mood, immunity, performance, recovery, sleep. All these things get produced when we nasally breathe. That nitric oxide doesn't actually get produced when we breathe through our mouths.
Okay.
Okay. Fun little fact about the nose. So when I say blow it all the way out, I want it all the way out so you can really suck that air over your sinuses, almost like you're trying to pull it through the back of your head.
Mm.
You got that?
Yep.
So
Okay.
let's
Let's
blow it
do
out,
it.
shake it out, blow it out, shake it out, 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 out. Let your head fall forward so you can sort of squeeze out your stomach. Out, out,
Yeah.
out, out, out. And then with your power buttons, breathe in through your nose, hit those power buttons, look up, breathe in, look up, breathe in, look up, breathe in, look up, in, hit the power buttons. Now hold it, wriggle, 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 wriggle that spine, wriggle out any tension from the day, and then let out a really big sigh. Ah,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like it's definitely like a fun though, but like it does make you feel more like energetic. And yeah, like breathing just makes you feel good. And considering I woke up like an hour and 15 minutes ago though, it does make you feel a lot more energized. So I can see if you do that straight after getting out of bed, it could have even more of a positive impact.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And because breath, you and I have been doing it our whole lives.
Mm.
And that's why I've noticed that it does, to get that medicinal dose, it does need to be guided. Otherwise, I'll tend to lose myself. That little
Mm.
reset breath, I call it, is really handy if you're kicking around your day and something's annoying me. I'm human, things annoy me. Instead of going, well, stuff that guy, and then I'm carrying sort of like a handful of gravel from that experience, handful of gravel from that experience, and at the end of the day, I often had to drink a lot, in the past when I didn't know what was going on. But when that happens now, when something annoys me, I'll discreetly pinch my fingers together in public and hold it, shake it, and just discreetly let it out, and that becomes me plugging back into my sovereign space.
Yeah, thank you though. And for our listeners though, I also just want to say though that people do breathwork all of the time though. It's like what I tend to do is like a box I breathe in, like if I'm really annoyed though. So it's when you breathe in, hold for four, let it out for four. Then you would just keep doing it, and until your parasympathetic nervous system is activated and you're a lot more relaxed. So the only other sort of questions though that I think we've got time for today though is that so lots of our listeners might be aspiring or qualified psychologists, and maybe they want to work with people with PTSD. What are some tips and tricks that you might want to share though, or what do you think is important for them to know about PTSD beyond textbooks and lectures?
Sure. Well, I've literally come back from a documentary film shoot where we were speaking on this subject, and a lot of the psychologists wrote down what I'm about to share now. So what you have to understand is that a nervous system, even when it's not functioning well, protects itself, and it senses when anything could potentially change it, even if it's for the better. And so we noticed with these veteran programs, about 3 days out, people would start canceling, canceling, canceling. If you had, you know, 20 people saying they're going to turn up, we used to have like up to 18 canceling. And it started at the 3 day mark. And what we found, the way to reverse out this cancellation uh, was have the engagement not all on the day, but break it up. So 3 days beforehand, just a call up going, hey, how you doing? Just checking in. We're doing this event. What would be something you'd like to get from it? Blah blah blah. And the fact is, it's two humans making a connection, and when that happens, that nullifies any fight or flight. It keeps them in their prefrontal cortex, out of their amygdala. And then uh, that was 72 hours before. And then 48 hours before, and just another call, check it in, all good. And then here's the kicker: we'd send them a text or a call the night before, just checking in, because a lot can happen at nighttime. That's when the unconscious mind can run the show. And so what we found was, if we didn't address them in that 72, 48, and the evening before, if even if they did turn up, they were completely exhausted. It's like the part of them that didn't want to change says, fine, if you're going to turn up, you can turn up, but we're going to have you completely exhausted. And you're working with no energy. And they're not going to get anything from it. But if we reached out beforehand, and you know had that human connection, that will get them out of their house, across a space that they may not have traveled before, to a door they've never been to before. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but if you're in that lockdown state where you don't want to change, you look for any reason to say it's too hard, turn around and go away. um, and these days, what people do, is if they're running a program, is they'll get them to use the Breathwork in Bed app for 2 weeks beforehand, and have it as a bit of a screening test. Okay, we'll have you on the program, but for 2 weeks, you've got to do this breath work in bed. And that will, if when they turn up, they're well rested. And that's a massive difference between someone who's well rested, attentive, you know, got some energy to work with, than someone that hasn't slept, fighting themselves. And even if they do turn up, they're completely exhausted. And it's very hard to work with someone who's feeling exhausted.
Wow, thank you. That is a brilliant tip about that text the night before, because, like you and probably so many other people, though, when it gets to 7 o'clock at night, when it starts to get dark, that's when my PTSD, that's when my mental health would go absolutely mad, to be honest, and it would be so intense. Just so, yeah, that's just a brilliant tech. That's just a brilliant idea though, because if someone gets that text, they know they're not alone. They know they're supported, and that can make all the difference. So, thank you. That is an amazing tip, though. And the idea, though, that you can use that app 2 weeks before, though, that's another very powerful idea because one of the problems that we definitely have here in the UK is that it's just that 1 week early session. There's nothing before, there's nothing after it. So if you have any difficulties in between those sessions, you can't get help. So the idea that we could use this app is actually a great idea. So a brilliant tip.
Well, in real life, we turn a 90% non-attendance rate into a 90 plus attendance rate on that principle.
And that definitely goes to show for our listeners, though, that like when we go in as like mental health services, we probably won't be able to do this as assistant psychologists, but once we're qualified, once we're like higher levels, and once we're able to like advocate for like changes, I think that we should potentially start like exploring and like these different ideas, though, like the contact before the a appointment, using apps that will and like let it be the a change that where that actually helps people and in aspires to this like longer term change.
Yeah, well, the high tech part of the equipment here isn't the app, it's people actually discovering that they don't own a set of lungs, they own a medicine cabinet with a lot of different shelves. And as someone who was prescribed a lot of different medications, I lost 6 years of my life to pills. I didn't know my own breath could do a better job getting me to sleep, to do a better job relieving my pain levels, to do a better job creating anti-inflammation through my whole system. And the reason I made the Breathwork in Bed app is for people to discover what's right there and have it handy, because I don't do something unless I'm reminded of it. And the amount of times that this has saved my life at 2 a.m. when you wake up and your head's doing those ones, I've lost count. That because it's something I discovered, it worked in Afghanistan and it worked when I was going through my divorce. I'm like, this actually works. This actually works. And I think if you find something that actually works, it's your responsibility to create ways for other people to access it as easy as possible.
I couldn't agree more. More though. So, like, I think that my final question is that because we're starting to like run out of time, though, is that how would you approach as someone who's very resistant to the idea of like a breath work or anything that you're going to present them with, though, to treat their PTSD?
Well, we came across a lot of people that were highly resistant to any form of treatment. And we have two ways around that. One was we would support the family. Okay, because it's not just the person that's suffering, often it's their family that's suffering as well, the people around them. So we would do what we could to support them vicariously through those people closest to them. The other thing, and this asks the question, so everyone's up against something. Whatever you're up against, ask the question, how many other people do you think are in the same situation? So when I'm up against somebody who's resistant, and again, this is universal. I've just discovered this through the veteran space. This could be anyone with cancer, relationship, or any form of anything. The golden question is, how many other people do you think are up against what you're up against now? And then you just wait. You count backwards from six. You count backwards from six again, and then eventually they'll go, oh, thousands. You know, and then and that can break their isolation. But then the next question is, do you think if you could find a way forward for you, you could find a way forward for them? And you see how that breaks the isolation, that golden question. And when we're isolated, we're in our amygdala, fight or flight, fast but dumb. You know, um, that when that isolation is broken, it's like the tourniquet comes off your intelligence and you can go into your prefrontal cortex. You can sort of put a satellite in the sky and see it all. So I work off the fact that everyone has everything they need inside of them. Our job is to guide them into accessing those resources. So holding the right space, asking the right questions, and if it was someone that wasn't in my line of specialty, like let's say it was someone with cancer who was resistant to seeking treatment or anything like that, I would find people that had gone through what they had gone through and successfully come out the other side. So that person who's gone through that journey, they might say something that they've heard before, but because they've been through it, they can shift it from their head into their heart, and that's when the real um, unblocking the connection happens, and the person starts accessing their own ability to move forward.
Yeah, that was really in like aside for thank you though, because like it's all about that sense of well, that sense of like shared a connection, knowing that you're not a alone, and the like. If other people can also come, come through this, then that so can you. So that was really really a useful word because I know by like for lots of us aspiring psychologists, we're often met with like job applications that want us to understand how to explain or like how would you deal with treatment resistant people though, which I think is a horrible term. And to be honest, I probably like misremembered it, but Bertie really just helped a lot of us on job applications. So I thank you.
I might add one more thing, because when people are isolated and fatigued, their cortisol levels are really high, and too high for too long drives your hormone levels into the dirt. So that's another form of fatigue. So I've often had success with guys heavily resistant. I'm like, well, have you had your testosterone checked recently? That's important. They say, yeah, it is important. I haven't had it checked. And then when they check it out and it's low, then they might see an endocrinologist, which works with hormones. They get their hormones balanced, and all of a sudden, they've got a part of their life that's out of fatigue, more energy, more options. Too many times I've seen people trying to fix their lives from points of exhaustion, and it just doesn't work. So my goal is, get them out of exhaustion, and then all of a sudden they will often instinctively know what to do next.
Okay, thank you. So well, we're out of like a time though, but so it's been like a brilliant talking. Like, so please tell everyone where they can find you online and everything that you do.
Sure. Well, three simple words: breath work in bed. You can turn your bed into a cloud tonight if you want to try the Breathwork in Bed app. And for everyone listening, I'm happy to give them the 28-day free trial. It won't cost you anything, and it might just make all the difference to your sleep tonight.
Brilliant. I thank you. So best of luck with the future, and a massive thank you for coming on the podcast too, Zoe.
Thanks, Connor.
So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it because I got so much out of it. This was a brilliant interview, and because I've been writing some clinical psychology reflections this week, I've reflected on a whole bunch of different things from this podcast episode. And whilst I'm not going to rehash all of it in this little outro section, there are three main bits that I want you to think about from this in interview. Firstly, the power of breath work, and that's something that I've spoken about lots of different times before on the podcast about how it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, about how it helps you, and how it can help you self soothe, and it can help you to get into a more relaxed bodily state. Also, Tim's a brilliant app, though. But like, I've been using it this weekend. It's been really insightful, useful, and I've also been doing breathing before I get up and before I go to bed, and it does help. So it's really, really useful. Also, some other aspects as aspiring or qualified clinical psychologists, we need to think about, right, if our mental health service is not being that friendly, or if our engagement isn't as high in a particular group, because of X, Y, and Z, we need to look at ourselves. We need to think about how could we change this? How can we change how we do therapy to meet the people where they are, and hopefully get them engaged, interested, and make them really want to engage up with us. Because in different psychology job descriptions, I'm constantly seeing stuff about, right, tell us what you would do if you have a client that is resistant to psychological treatment. And the idea of just talking to them, getting them to think about their shared humanity, and thinking about how many other people that struggle with the same difficulties as them, that helps them to break out the isolation. So there's a lot of brilliant stuff that I've reflected on, and this interview will definitely be really, really useful for me going into the future. So if you know anyone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help me spread the word about the podcast. And if you want to learn more, please check out Healing as a Survivor, a personal and clinical psychology guide to healing from sexual violence. Available in all the usual places. And if you want to support the podcast on a monthly basis and get access to tons of great rewards, then now you can to patreon.com/the Psychology Word podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, then you can also do that at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. And as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always reach out in all the normal ways. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwhiteley.net. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time.